One thing I hear most in the collecting community is, it was easier back in the day. Was it though? I ask my community if they think collecting has gotten easier or harder in recent years, and the response was pretty diverse. Yeah, right. A lot of people have talked about the current state of collecting, whether it be Pokemon cards, video games, or toys. I like to give you my perspective on collecting, my experiences, and stories you may have heard before. My journey started when my mom gave me a 1989 Super Mario Bros. 3 Raccoon Mario toy. I was about 4 to 5 years old. The Mario in question doesn't have the screen he normally has, but I didn't care. From then on, I'd go to yard sales and flea markets to get more items for my collection. Back then, there weren't that many items to get at your local Walmart or game store. You had to go for miles to find treasure, or hope you struck gold at yard sales. Game stores didn't always sell video game merchandise until the late 2000s. Places like Hot Topic and EB Games would have small signs of life, but it would only be a one-up Fuzzy Dice, Mario Uno, a Mario wristband, and at EB Games, the cream of the crop, the toy site Mario plushes. However, they only had one Yoshi, Luigi, and Bowser. Mario was plentiful. It was clear that collectors knew the other characters would be harder to get. KB Toys was a great place that had some good stuff, like the Toy Island Sonic X figures. For me, that store was a godsend, since Toys R Us was a 2-hour drive. Anytime I got to visit Toys R Us, I would get any Sonic X figure KB Toys never got, like the Megabot figures. Flea markets in the early 2000s were a sight to behold. Imagine paying $10 for a GamePro Sonic Adventure 2 Battle Sonic figure. Yes, that was real. Getting a box full of toys named after Mario and Sonic for $20 was also within reach. It was mostly compiled of old SMB3 toys, Sonic LED McDonald's toys, Applause Mario figures, and one Funky Kong figure. Thinking back on it, it was not that super. Regardless, the booth with the $10 Soap Shoe Sonic figures and Toy Island figures, all boxed, is something you'll never see again. A place called Hollywood Video merged with a store called Game Crazy. This place had a small section of those Goldie Mario figures and candy tins. While the merch on shelves was nothing to lose your brains about, the displays and pre-order bonuses were. Does anyone remember that Conker plush in the tank? I saw one on the window at Game Crazy and begged my mom to get it. Sadly, you had to pre-order Conker Live and Reloaded to get it, and me, being a tiny child, I could not get the game. A similar ordeal happened when it was the 15th anniversary for Sonic. Specifically, when it was this Sonic figure from '06. It was held for a couple who pre-ordered the game. They were on vacation. And yeah, Sonic 06, by the way, was $60 at launch. In 2008, Jazzwares acquired the license to produce Sonic toys, and they'd be sold in stores like Toys R Us and FYE. I had the privilege of getting to go to Toys R Us for the exclusive figures when I was on vacation in North Carolina. Toys R Us was always full of Sonic toys, which is how I got the majority of my collection. FYE was another store where I got them. Sonic's 20th anniversary was a time to be alive, and I got all the 20th anniversary 2-inch figures I could get. Places like eBay had decent prices for the figures before Tomy became the new Sonic toy manufacturer. That's how I got Sir Lancelot, Shadow, and Excalibur Sonic. Tomy is often forgotten since people were spoiled by Jazzwares with the amount of Sonic characters we got. Still, Tomy had gems like Chow Pack and the Sonic Infinite and Zavok Pack. Also, Sonic Boom toys. Nowadays with Jax, it's a hit or miss when you go to Walmart, Target, or GameStop. I sometimes find Sonic figures, but most days, it's a miss. eBay doesn't have good prices on Jax Sonic figures unless you get lucky. Sometimes you can find them on GameStop and Target's websites for good prices. Getting Jax Mario figures isn't a problem though. They're everywhere. I wasn't allowed to collect Pokemon until I was 13 years old, but I remember the old Master Quest and Advanced toys being on store shelves. I vaguely remember this Goldeen plush, but I cannot for the life of me find it. The play-by-play plush is the only old one I could find. but it looks nothing like I remember. I also remember the set of elbow and knee pads with white gloves that had the old ash on them. My mom got them since that was all they had at Walmart, and I loved biking as a kid. Now they're trashed and nowhere to be found online. If you know anything about these items, please let me know in the comments. Anyway, as a 13-year-old finally able to collect Pokemon, I obviously got into the card game, and yes, the shelves were full of booster packs. Every time I went to Walmart or Kmart, they always had Pokemon cards in stock. Of course, I heard back in the 90s, people had a hard time getting Pokemon cards. Other Pokemon items like figures and plushes are not a problem to collect. They've always been easy to find and are always in stock. When it comes to Pokemon cards nowadays, 99% of the time, out of stock. Based on my testimony, collecting has gotten better and worse at the same time. Let me explain. Back then, you could barely find any video game merchandise outside yard sales and flea markets. Now it's a common commodity at your local Walmart. Video games have gotten harder to get in recent years, however. On the retro side of things anyway. When I wanted Mario Party 2 back in the 2000s, my mom took me to a local game store, and we got it for around $5 for the cartridge only. It now runs for around $20. I understand the outrage people feel when they remember or look back at the times when retro games were cheap at yard sales, flea markets, thrift stores, and local game stores. The issue is, this blinds the community from the present. There are cheap video games, and you can find good deals. You just need to look, because one day, we'll look back at this era and wish we were here. It's true that prices have risen at thrift stores and small game stores in recent years. The reason is due to the competitive nature of online reselling, the rise in people going to thrift stores more, and inflation. Don't Google that! The money these stores make helps fund their community organizations and jobs. One culprit that people like to point fingers at is resellers who go to thrift stores, flea markets, swap meets, and local game stores to flip for profit. Some make a whole YouTube channel out of it, and I used to do that in my vlogs, but truth be told, I cannot even find anything on and off camera to resell anymore. I only sell things from my personal collection, duplicates from blind bags and boxes, or take in eligible items to my local game and card stores nowadays. Scalpers are what people dislike, as they take everything, while resellers leave things behind for others to get. Some resellers even start their own store, and they can be generous. My local game store is like that with their store credit. As for prices on games and toys nowadays, the $80 price tag on Nintendo games is steep, almost $60, but people forget that Yoshi's Island back in 1995 was $60 at launch. So was Sonic 06 and Sonic Boom Rides of Lyric. Heck, need I remind you of Neo Geo AES games? At launch, they were $200 to $300 a piece. The Panasonic 3DO was $700. If you told someone in the 90s that a high-quality Nintendo console, like the Switch 2, was only $450, they would rejoice. However, this doesn't mean that Nintendo and other companies aren't greedy. To be honest, though, if Sega still made consoles, they would be eating Nintendo up. As for toys, I hate that you can't get $6 action figures anymore, but the quality has increased. The Sonic X figures were made of hollow plastic, while the new Jax figures have more of a solid plastic. Resource and Jazzbear Sonic figures broke easily, and the joints were loose, mostly on the last release of figures. When quality and demand go up, so do the prices. So, has collecting gotten easier or harder? Both. We live in an age where we can go to our local Walmart and find Mario and Sonic figures in the toy aisle. Some prices may not be to our liking, but no era can be perfect. Nostalgia has a way of blinding us to what was actually there. The 2000s was my favorite era, but during that time, the GameCube sold less compared to the PlayStation 2 and Xbox, even though I adored the GameCube. Horrifying historical events happened. You know, like the Twin Tower thing. I can't elaborate anymore because YouTube will be at my butt. Anyway, it was a scary yet fun time to be alive. My point? We tend to focus on the negative aspects of every era we live through, until it's gone. So enjoy collecting in this one-of-a-kind era until we move on to the next. If you want to bring back something from the past, do so in your own way, as long as it doesn't harm anyone, that is. This hobby is meant to be fun, and it can be. Much like life itself, collecting is a journey. Enjoy it instead of dreading it. If you aren't enjoying it, find a different hobby. Life is too short to do things you hate. I enjoy going out and looking for things related to my special interests. That brings me joy. So no matter how hard collecting may be nowadays, I'm not gonna stop.